Hello and welcome to this round 2 here in Prague, and we're going to have a former Pro Tour champion in the form of Samuele Estrati there from Italy, the winner of Pro Tour Philadelphia back when Modern was brand new, brand shiny new, against Thomas Friala here, and we get a chance to see Estrati kicking things off. He looks to be on black-green. On the other side of things though, Thomas kicking things off with the planes here. And actually, at least 3 colours here for Estrati, kicking things off there. He's got Gulkor's Apprentice there, so it's the 2-2 that can potentially do some good work for him in the late game with his graveyard also. And no early plays from Friala here.
From my experience, blue-black is probably the most powerful archetype in Seal deck. Most of the, some of the commons in blue are very powerful in blue-black. A Treasure Cruise as a common.
Yeah, it's just one of those cards that if you're having a nice fair game and everything seems about even and then one person plays a Treasure Cruise, they just feel miles in front.
And Dimir Guildmage, also as a common. A very powerful card in Seal deck, especially when in a format when there's not a lot of removal.
Absolutely. Phalanx Leader on the other side of things, this signaling a little bit of heroic action. Green-white, this is one of the things that it can potentially get going, and the leader, once it's got a few friends out, can really generate a substantial board. Just a Forest and a Pass here for Estrati, so he potentially representing all sorts of interaction on this next turn.
You can see a Prey Upon in Thomas' hand. Prey Upon is a pretty good card in the Heroic deck.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an easy way of getting targeting involved, but right now it is one of those things that is going to be just sat on the wayside because he's not going to want to have a fight with that accomplice just yet. But gradually, as more and more creatures get into play, this Staunch-Hearted Warrior, it is one that will very happily get in a fight, because anytime it gets targeted, it's getting 2+1/+1 counters. Going to be absolutely huge very, very quickly indeed.
So the heroic mechanic in the Ultimate Masters is fueled by mostly by Umbras.
And the Umbras, of course, mean that those heroic creatures very, very difficult to kill off because the Umbra ability meaning that they won't then die to at least the first bit of removal. Here comes Gulsteed for Samuele Estrati. He's just sort of, in some respects, not representing so clear an obvious 1-2-3 strategy, but he's got just powerful cards going on, and the life total is reflecting that, as it's Samuele who's been able to get in the early hits. But as Thomas Friala starts to find things to target his heroic creatures with, we could really see this turn around pretty fast.
And the Face Fetters could get rid of the Gulsteed.
Yeah, Faith Fetters, just one of the most powerful answers to so much in the format. Doesn't just have to be targeting a creature, but whatever it targets is essentially not going to do anything else in the game. In addition, that 4 life, very potent also. Actually a very good answer to a lot of the heroic creatures, even if they've got Umbras on them.
And Thomas decides not to play his Prey Upon. And that's a little awkward situation here, because if he wants to pump his creatures, he has to play his Prey Upon, and the only target is Gulkor's Apprentice. And that's not really something you want to kill with a Prey Upon. Yeah,
Prey Upon, it's one of those cards that it really vacillates in terms of its power depending on the format it finds itself in. Right now in Thomas' deck, though, it's looking pretty decent. The fact that it gets you that extra heroic trigger on top of being a pretty solid removal spell means that you want to save it for something good to remove.
Yeah, that's a lot of lands in Thomas' hand, and not really, no good option here.
Yeah, the heroic deck often wants to be fairly low to the ground in terms of what it's doing. It doesn't need as many lands as some of the other decks that we see. As a Canker Abomination coming down there for Friala here.
A little Bombo with Face Fetters. You want to get rid of the creatures on the other side of the board, not just make them linger there for too long.
It's still,
still 4/4.
A pretty solid size there, and the Abomination there with that hybrid mana, even though there's not a sign of a swamp in Friala's deck just yet, still a pretty solid one.
Yeah, back in the days, 4/4 had
a drawback or two.
A drawback, yeah. Derelor.
Oh wow, yeah.
Nettletooth Djinn.
And here we're going to see that Prey Upon. And this is almost a tempo play that we see here from Friala. He just wants to get in a bit of damage here where he can. And
oh wow.
Oh, no spell mastery there, so this is just a straight up instant speed removal, but I'm pretty sure that Estrati happy to sell for a 2-for-1 there with that Unholy Hunger. Destroying a creature. If you do have a couple of instants or sorceries in the graveyard, you get to gain some life as well. But yeah, that worked out very nicely for Estrati as well. And while he is paying full retail for this Gomag Angler, not going to mind too much. He's easily got the largest creature on the battlefield now with the 5/5 Zombie Fish. Gomag Angler, a regular in Modern and indeed in Legacy, just because of how cheaply it can be cast a lot of the time in those formats.
Very unimpressive. Those Eye Mystics here.
Yeah,
2, 3 for 4 prowess, but no spell to cast and no enchantment to retrieve from the graveyard.
Yeah, often these green-white decks have plenty of enchantments to get back, but right now the Lotus Eye Mystics, yeah, just kind of, it feels almost like an overcosted 3/3, and here comes the Treasure Cruise. We talked about this at the top of the show, just about how this can be the way that if two decks are doing things that seem fairly fair, all of a sudden one of them gets to pull ahead. And here Estrati, you know, he's again paying a lot of mana for this effect. Even if you're paying that amount of mana, drawing 3 cards is still one of the most powerful things you can do in Magic.
So Thomas drew one of the cards you really want to draw in the green and white heroic. Travel Preparations.
Oh, it's so good. I mean, it was so good back in Innistrad when it came along the first time, and that was before you had the whole we get to target lots of things. So one of his targets, of course, the Phalanx Leader. The other one, less obvious where you're going to put the targets, goes for his Mystics. So he's got a Prowess trigger here, he's got a Heroic trigger, and then on top of that, he actually is just putting counters on because of the Travel Preparations itself.
So he needs another one. Yeah, there's two counters on the... He needs 2 more counters, sorry. So that was just a trigger from the Phalanx Leader, and he can flash it back.
Yeah, this is pretty exciting.
Yeah, that was the card he wanted to draw. I mean, I don't think there was a better card to draw at this point.
Yeah, I mean, where previously we had a Gomag Angler as the biggest creature on the battlefield,
Yeah, now
Kangaroo Abomination is now going to end up even larger than.
it's going to be at least 7/7.
Looks like we're actually going for the full 8/8 here. That means that even a double block on the other side of things from Estrati not going to be good enough.
And then...
In terms of high velocity cards, that Travel Preparations, absolutely gigantic. I mean, it says something that there are lots of cards in Ultimate Masters that have had their rarity downgraded. So they've gone from maybe being a rare in one set to an uncommon in this set. Travel Preparations was a common, and it's gone up to uncommon in this set because of quite how potent it ends up being. And here we see Gomag Angler trading off there with that Phalanx Leader, but a big swing in terms of life totals and indeed board state here for Thomas Friala with that top deck.
And the Mystics were 3, 5, 7. 7 damage here.
Yeah,
it's 2 prize triggers.
Estrati with a lot of cards. He has just resolved a Treasure Cruise, so one would hope that he's got something. And Ether Snipe comes down. No evocations here. Just plays the big elemental. Gets to bounce the Canker Abomination. That if it comes down, it will come back down as just a 4/4 again.
Yeah, and if Thomas doesn't have a spell, he can just trade the Mystic for the Ether Snipe. So which is not exactly exciting when your opponent has 5 cards left in hand.
Yeah, this has been a really back and forth game that we've seen thus far.
So what do you think Estrati's splashing for? He has a Forest in play.
I mean, in terms of big cards that get splashed for quite a bit, I can easily imagine that there could be the likes of a Spider spawning, just so that if you get to the super late game, you can get something going. Eternal Witness there, letting Friala set up his Prey Upon once more.
That's pretty good. No, that's a pretty good target.
Yep. Of course, you get the Prowess ability in there, which means that clearing out the blocker works just fine. And then another big attack. I mean, at this point, we're talking about tempo from Thomas Friala. He's just trying to push through damage where he can and doing a pretty good job of it. Only 3 damage left to deal here to Samuel Estrati in this game 1. Sleight of hand in hand for Estrati. Looks like he's got...
And Holy Hunger. And and with the sleight of hand, he would have Spell Mastery to gain 2 life.
It's interesting that when you look at his hand, very, very curtailed on mana for anything other than black mana here. Uses sleight of hand, gets a look at the top two, put one in hand and the other on the bottom.
There was the green card. I couldn't quite see what it was. Is it the spider spawning? There's a crow. And I couldn't quite see the other card.
I mean, the spider spawning here, it's...
Oh, no, it's not. It's not even the
if
green
it is
card.
in there, it's just sort of buying a little bit of time for Astrati.
Yeah.
He's not got so many creatures in the graveyard just yet. But Unholy Hunger here, yep, that will help this situation quite a bit. Get rid of the biggest threat on the other side of the battlefield by a little bit of time with that 2 life, that essentially dealing with 1 attack from an Eternal Witness.
So the reason he played during his main phase was to play around God's Willing.
Yeah, you don't want to have to worry about that one stopping things. Canker Abomination a 5/5 because there's only the 1 creature on Astrati's side of things.
Because he could have waited for his opponent maybe to target his Mystics with an Umbra. But no, he decided not to take the risk.
Crow of Dark Tidings there coming down. Putting a few more cards in the graveyard, including a Chainer's Edict, which may prove
value here.
A little bit of extra value. Get rid of, well, presumably that Eternal Witness at some point. And a Deranged Assistant to further fill the graveyard. Deranged Assistant, one of those cards that I can easily imagine that when people first see it, they might feel like its ability a drawback. Certainly in Ultimate Masters, it almost always is, by putting cards from your library into your graveyard, just giving you more to work with.
Oh man, back in Ravnica, this guy was... Let's tap, add 1 mana, draw a card, pretty much.
More or less, yeah. A big deal in Innistrad when it was in the blue-green self-mill deck, doing all sorts of good work, as this Vessel of Endless Rest has a few interesting things to put on the bottom here. I mean, Chainer's Edict, that's the card with flashback. That's the one that's kind of most obvious. And it looks like that is the one he's going for.
There's a Gold Color's Apprentice as well.
And we've already seen a couple of delve spells being played by Astrati, though he's not actually had to do very much delving on either of them.
He has 7 lands. It's 2 away from casting an Artisan of Kozilek. And bouncing and retrieving an Ezosnipe, 2 bounce. An Abomination, probably.
I mean, right now, every creature that Thomas Fiala has is a lethal one, so there's going to have to be a big play here from Astrati if he wants to stay in this.
Oh, Pattern of Rebirth. That's one of the green cards.
Artisan of Kozilek getting back. I mean, it's got to be the Snipe, surely, here. These Eldrazi, while they might, on the face of things, seem very expensive, pretty castable in this format. We do see games ending up with lots of lands in play, especially in the sealed portions. Maybe not quite so much in draft.
Yeah, he had the mana to cast the Artisan.
Yeah.
I was just missing one of the lands.
Satyr Wayfinder, the pickup from Thomas Friala.
And now the problem is, for Thomas, is that even a God's Willing would not actually do the job.
Yeah,
Artisan
is
of Kozilek
fully colorless.
Yeah, you can't protect from Artisan of Kozilek, so we'll just have to
just go wide.
Yeah,
I mean, he's only got 1 damage to deal,
but that's 1 hard damage to deal with white green. There's not a lot of ways to evade. There's only 1 card that gives trample in the format. It's a Wild Hunger, and it's probably not played in that deck. There are not a lot of ways to give flying.
I mean, I think that the easiest thing for him will be to be just making lots of creatures, because I would imagine that this green-white deck is able to go wide a little bit more easily. An attack here from Artisan of Kozilek. The Annihilator was likely to just eat a couple of lands here from Thomas Friala.
Yeah, that's a bold play from Astrati, because now that leaves himself.
I mean, he must have a decent follow-up here, right?
I know he has the Apprentice, the Gold Color's Apprentice. He can't leave himself dead to God's Willing. God's Willing. So even though he has blue cards in hand, he needs to play a black card. Activate a black ability.
Skywing Avon there. So he's got a little bit of potential to protect himself against flyers now as well, though not so many flyers that you're likely to see from the green-white list. Looks like Thomas Friala, in spite of having had a decent enough start here and doing the first... Well, I mean, technically, I guess that he's done 21 damage because there's been 2 points of life gain for Astrati. That spell mastery being very, very important, giving him just that final point of life that he needs. And it may be that Astrati here is able to close it out in spite of having been brought all the way down to just a single point of life.
And that's typically the games... When I played Seal deck, that's typically the games I was in. There's a control deck with all the answers, and sometimes an aggro deck that fails to just get it to zero.
Think twice here. Use that a couple of times to draw a few more cards, and Astrati continuing to rumble into the red zone. Now the Ether Snipe joining Artisan of Kozilek, just forcing a little bit more action on Friala, figuring out his blocks. And the Annihilator, which didn't seem like so much of a big deal on that first set of attacks, is beginning to kick in a little bit now. There's been a lot of land sacrificed now by Friala, and he's starting to have to block also just so that he can keep his life total around, which means that the problems that Annihilator causes are only going to get larger as we get to this stage in the game. A double block there just to mean that Ether Snipe gets killed off.
Yes, so now what's his out now?
Yeah, going wide is no longer a reasonable expectation.
Going dead is one.
I mean, it seems almost likely at this stage in the game that that's going to be the case. I mean, there's enough attackers on the other side of things that this is going to be a real problem for Friala here. And in spite of going down to just a single point of life, Samuel Astrati finding it. And this will be the kind of game that Thomas Friala may well find himself watching back afterwards, trying to work out if there's any way that he could have eked through more damage. If he'd played the Prey Upon at a different moment, perhaps, because that was one of the sort of big decision points. He used it for tempo in the kind of relatively early game, and it seemed good at that point, but somehow or other he wasn't quite able to piece it all together. And ultimately, by the time that he used one iteration of his Prey Upons, he did end up losing out to a response from Samuel Astrati in the form of removal.
Yeah, maybe a turn here, but it really didn't look good to play it. Maybe it was the right play, but at the time, sacrificing your most valuable resource, one of your very few removal, to kill a 2/2 that's going to come back, doesn't look that attractive.
So these players going to their sideboards now. I mean, one of the good things about Ultimate Masters, the sheer power level in this set means that when it comes to sideboarding, often you do have good options available to you. And I know that a lot of players, when it comes to this format, they're looking a little bit more aggressively about how they can splash as well, which means that when it starts to come to sideboarding time, a lot of different interesting things that can potentially done to zig to your opponent's zags.
Yeah, if you're on the white-green side of the table here, if you plan to make your deck slower, you don't want to make it too slow, or you want to make it very powerful, because your opponent, as a black-blue player, if you give him more time, he will have more resources that will just trump your splash or your effect on the later game.
Now, in terms of Friala, what he's seen, what he's not seen from Astrati, we've seen that Astrati has forests. We've not seen loads of green cards from him thus far.
Pattern of Rebirth.
Like, do we think that that's likely to be the only thing?
Could be.
And Pattern of Rebirth is certainly very powerful, and once you see it in your opponent's deck, I mean, Artisan of Kozilek, obviously a powerful creature to get on the battlefield, fetching up an Ether Snipe, but
could be something else.
There could be one of the really big Haymaker Eldrazi in there as well, and that's got to be a little bit of a worry if you're Friala.
Yeah, without a way, we haven't seen a way for him to sacrifice a creature.
Yeah, that's one of the key pieces of the puzzle. If there's the likes of
Connoisseur.
Yeah, the Connoisseur is the big one that you can sacrifice a creature to put a +1/+1 counter on it. That, alongside Pattern of Rebirth, can set up some very, very powerful plays indeed. And this is a format where, I mean, Pattern of Rebirth, when it was first printed, you wouldn't necessarily think, yes, I can definitely get a really scary top-end monster to be able to fetch with it. This limited format, there is the potential for any number of very, very nasty monsters. And we're not just talking about the likes of the Eldrazi. even the likes of just getting into play, a Polaka Worm, a Woodfall Primus, there's a lot of them knocking about in this format.
Yeah, I don't think he would actually splash
No.
Primus here.
No, not either of those potentially, but there are certainly some scary monsters that can be lurking on the horizon. Friala on the play here for this next game by the looks of things. Istrati, one of those players that while he did first come to notoriety for winning the first modern Pro Tour, he won that with Splinter Twin back in Philadelphia. He's also shown himself to be adept at limited as well, and he's one of those players who really likes to work on the mind game side of things, figure out what's in their opponent's hands, work on sort of the bluffs and counter bluffs that really sort of typify really high-end Magic.
I think that was the second modern tournament. Premier event.
Yes.
The first one was Worlds right before in 2011.
Yeah, that sounds about right, yeah. That Pro Tour, the one where Modern was new enough that there were maybe a few kinks still to be worked out. There were some poison plans that were winning very, very quickly indeed. Splinter Twin took a little bit longer to get removed from the format, but...
actually, the Worlds might have been after. Because I don't remember Blazing Shoal at Worlds.
Though, to be fair, it may be that no one realised about Blazing Shoal at that point.
Be.
It was definitely an unusual deck that was pretty potent.
I know, it might have been after. Yeah, the timeline is a little blurry at this point.
We've been in Magic for a while.
Yeah.
Estrasi checking out his hand. He's got lands and spells, a reasonably good starting point for him. And Faith Feathers again in hand for Friala. The Fetters are really premium removal spell in basically every format it's ever been in. Hitting those land drops good and early, getting his colours all sorted, very helpful. And Sato Wayfinder, meaning that he now gets to potentially fix his draws a little bit also.
Yeah. I'm not a big fan of Wayfinder in White Green Heroic, especially with Pilgrim of Heliod.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because I think the Sato Wayfinder in this format in total is very good indeed. There are lots and lots of ways of interacting with the graveyard, and if anything, I would say that this green-white list, aside from having ways of getting enchantments back from the graveyard with Mystics and so on, it's really not looking at using its graveyard as much as many decks in the format.
Like the upside of having an extra land is to have just a 1/1 for 1 on the board.
Yeah, Sultai Skullkeeper for Estrati, in many respects, it does a similar role as what the Wayfinder does on the other side of things.
You don't get a land.
You don't get a land, but I think that cards in the graveyard for Estrati is typically better than cards in the graveyard for Fiala. All right, Wingsteed Rider in hand for Friala. That another nice heroic creature here. And flying was something we didn't see too much from him in Game 1. This is one of the heroic creatures that, while the base numbers on it are... they're okay. They're not super exciting. They get very exciting once you start targeting it with almost anything.
Interesting fact. So, Samuel fetched a Swampo Island with the expense, Terramorphic expense.
I think
I didn't quite pay attention.
I know he fetched the island.
I know he didn't fetch a forest.
And then he milled a forest with the Skullkeeper. I mean, I presume that he's got more than one forest in there.
He could only have one. I mean, he's heavy blue and black. So I would probably not play a second forest, especially if you have a Terramorphic expense.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense.
So that means if his green splash is only Pattern of Rebirth, then he won't be able to play his green spells. If it's a Spider Spawning, then it doesn't really matter because you can still cast it from the graveyard with this flashback.
Okay, so as much as we say that there's not too much graveyard interaction, Eternal Witness, which we saw in Game 1, is still a thing here, and we are able to get back a few more heroic creatures. Meanwhile, the graveyard interaction on the other side of things, with that Forbidden Alchemy, a little bit stronger as we get Estrati here, both fixing his draws and fixing his graveyard up to do good things later.
So Eternal Witness probably the one of the only ways in Thomas's deck to take advantage of the milling.
And we know that Lotus Eye Mystics can also get back enchantments from the graveyard. So I mean, maybe we're slightly underselling this green white deck in terms of what it can do.
I get it. It's not super exciting, but it has some
bit of utility there.
Yeah.
And hitting land drops, especially if you're splashing pretty good. Mono the Unhallowed here, generating a couple of zombies for Estrati. If he gets up to the point where he's got 7 mana, which certainly happened last game, he can flash that one back, create a few more zombies.
And a Beacon Apparition in Samuel's graveyard, just to make sure Eternal Witness or the Mystics don't actually bring back anything.
I really like Beacon Apparition, actually. It's one of those cards that it's never going to be a high pick. It's never going to be a sort of a key card that you're like, look at my deck, it's got this Beacon Apparition. But at the same time, in this format, it can shut off a lot of things that can be problematic, and generating a 1/1 flyer for 1 isn't the end of the world on the side on top of that.
I love Reanimator strategies in draft, and every time I'm playing against untapped Swamp or Plains,
it's so easy to cast with that hybrid mana. We'll get a chance to see exactly what the Orzhov are doing on Ravnica. In between games, in between matches, we're potentially going to have a little look at some of the cards from the full visual card reference that went up yesterday for Ravnica Allegiance. That one will be pre-releases happening very soon indeed. And Estrati here, swinging for the fences, wanting to get a little bit of damage before Friala can get too much going on here. He'd rather race than block.
Oh.
What have we here?
Miraculous Recovery. Never mind, he has a lot of interactions with City Wayfinder.
I kind of like it. Let's get back Heliod's Pilgrim, who in turn is going to come into play. Firstly, come into play with a +1/+1 counter, meaning that the Pilgrim will match up very nicely against these zombies. But then on top of that, let's search up an aura and let we get a chance to find out a little bit more about what's going on in Thomas Friala's deck here. Immediately pulls an Umbra to the front.
These are not the most impressive ones, but Conviction is actually pretty good with the Rider.
Yeah, I mean, he's already got Faith Fetters in hand. I mean, that's kind of the cool thing. You can just search up the Faith Fetters as removal. Conviction with the Rider is nice because you get to keep bouncing it, replaying it, and every time that's a heroic trigger.
He also had a Revelark to play with his graveyard.
Oh, yeah. All right. Everything that we previously said,
yeah.
Ignore.
Well, yeah, okay, fine. This is not your basic.
Yeah, this is not necessarily how every heroic deck is drawn up. There's heroic creatures, but there's also this graveyard side of it, which I'm kind of digging. I like it.
So yeah, I was just stating in general, City Wayfinder, green white heroic, not the best pick, but in this deck, I guess it's makes sense.
Unholy Hunger, an important answer available to Estrati here. He's got the mana to play it, and this time round, Spell Mastery immediately in effect. The 2 life, incredibly important in game 1.
Yeah. You don't want to play your Umbra here against 5 open mana.
Yeah, this is one of those situations where it's kind of a tester of how experienced you are. I mean, against Estrati, who's already shown that he's got those Unholy Hungers, yeah, get that attack in, force him to use it for minimal value. Minimal value being kill a guy, gain 2 life.
It's pretty good value already.
Another copy already in hand for Estrati. He's a hungry, hungry boy. Hits keep on coming here as we get still more heroic creatures coming from Friala. This one, the Staunch-Hearted Warrior. Yes, it's attacking on the ground, but when enchanted, yeah, it's all of a sudden getting +1/+1 from the Hyena Umbra. It's got first strike. It's getting +1, +2/+2 for being targeted. And now, because of that Umbra, it's that much more difficult to kill.
It's a 5/5 first strike. And if it was to die, well, he would not die.
Yeah. The Totem Armor ability, very potent indeed. It's one of those things that for the longest time in the history of Magic, enchant creatures, they came with this sort of secret extra line of text, which is kind of, what are you doing? Why are you putting this on a creature? You're setting yourself up for 2-for-1s left, right, and center. But because of Totem Armor essentially being, it'll be the thing that gets killed off if the creature dies rather than the creature itself, it's a very safe aura to start throwing around. Here comes Gomag Angler with a bit of a discount thanks to various cards in the graveyard and delve. And the follow-up on there is a Stitch Drake, which has a different kind of delve. It's an enforced delve of 1 rather than anything else. But a 3/4 flyer for 3, nothing to complain about there.
Yeah, I really like the way Heroic was introduced in this set. It's not just instants and pump spells. It goes really well with the Umbras.
Yeah, it's just it's a cool mechanic, and one that I would be interested to see if we get to see coming back in some other set, because I do feel like it's got a little bit of value there, and it adds a different element to this set, because I think a lot of people have looked at this, looked at Ultimate Masters, and they focus very heavily on the graveyard interactions, because there are a lot of them.
Yeah.
This is one of the elements that's not graveyard based at all, and adds a little bit of extra nuance to the set. Here comes Faith Feathers from Fiala. He advances to 22 life, deals with the big zombie fish, and potentially sets himself up some nice attacks here. Faith Fetters, ever since it was first printed in Ravnica, has been a very potent removal spell indeed. The fact that you can stick it on any permanent and deal with the activated abilities on that permanent is interesting. I've seen it used on lands that have interesting abilities. I've seen it used on artifacts, and then of course the more straightforward getting rid of a creature.
Planeswalkers.
Yeah, Planeswalker is a great one to hit with Faith Fetters.
I've never seen it on the land, actually.
I've definitely seen it on I'm trying to think of some of the names of these lands that I've seen it on.
Mutavault?
Any of the lands that can pump out creatures have been pretty decent.
Gavany Township.
Gavany Township's a good one.
Soros Path.
I mean, even throw it down on that Rishadan port so it can't tap down your lands anymore. It will not stop mana abilities, but it'll stop most other things.
Oh wow, that's a huge blowout here.
Yeah, I mean,
Slum Reaper.
Normally with Slum Reaper, sacrificing the creature can feel like a big cost, but
so if you sacrifice a creature, doesn't like the Umbra is not making it not die. You have to sacrifice
the Umbra
it.
is looking for creatures to get destroyed, and a sacrifice is not a destruction effect. So Slum Reaper, essentially the perfect answer to what was going on there. Gomag Angler didn't really mind being sacrificed all that much because it was just sat on Faith Fetters. Basically, this is the kind of turnaround that Samuel Estrati was going to need in the face of what was otherwise a relatively difficult to deal with threat.
Well, Thomas knew Samuel had
Chainer's
Edict, so he could have played around Chainer's Edict and that way play around the Slum Reaper. However, that did not work out so well for him in this time.
All right, so we've got Penumbra Worm here. This is one of the cards that the rarity has shifted on it over the years. Originally in Apocalypse, that one was a rare. The 6/6, that when it dies, you get a new 6/6. I like this one quite a bit. It's just a really solid value creature.
Played and constructed.
Yeah.
The Reanimator. It's a pretty good target.
But at this point in time, Samuel Estrati, he's got a little bit of an air force going, which means that he may be able to just get things going and protect himself from the worm on the ground. Though Trample is a little bit problematic. He pulls a Compass and this Skywing Haven now.
You can trade the first time around and then
kill off the token with one of his variety removal spells. I mean, potentially even just bounce the token would be ideal. That's certainly something there's potential for. But Flyer's coming on the other side of things for Friala. He's got a Reveillark at the front of his hand.
That was another good play to make there. If he evoked the Reveillark, could have brought back the Eternal Witness.
Get back a Faith Feathers.
Faith Feathers and Eternal Witness. And then play the Witness, get back the Reveillark.
Oh wow!
It takes a lot of mana, but that's a lot of value. I mean, he can still do it when the Reveillark dies. He doesn't have to do it, but it's just something you have to keep in mind for next games. Maybe here just the Flyer is better, just to block the 3/4 the Stitch Drake.
So now a 7/7 for number one, thanks to this travel preparations coming along, getting it stuck into the red zone here. This time round, Estrati choosing to just take it. Doesn't leave himself with a whole lot of space to maneuver with. And Friala trying to close things out here before Estrati can do what he did in game one, which was to just overpower value.
Stabilizing on 1. Now he hasn't stabilized on 2. He's very much in trouble here.
Yeah, the trample on Penumbra Worm, a little bit of an issue. Travel preparations here being used pretty aggressively by Friala.
Yeah, Strata's in trouble. At 2 life, he's going to have to chum the Revelark. And if Revelark ever leaves the battlefield,
it gets back so much.
Yeah, with Eternal Witness.
And it's a leave the battlefield trigger as well, which means that bouncing that Revelark with 2 counters on, not too exciting either, because it will still mean that it gets to bring back a couple of threats.
And there are a few combos with Evoke in this format.
A Prey Upon as well. Quel dommage.
Oh, now it's time to play Unholy Hunger.
Literally exactly the play that we saw of the last game, Unholy Hunger, to make sure that the fight does not happen with that, in this case, Penumbra Worm.
How could it be a turn to mist here?
Pretty good.
Turn to mist on Revelark, bring back Eternal Witness and something else. And Eternal Witness getting back the turn to mist.
Whew. I like it.
That would be a lot of value.
Okay, so now we have a 6/6 trampling black worm in play. The shadow of that Penumbra Worm, if you will.
I could bring a Rider, Wingstead Rider, and Eternal Witness.
Just doing it all.
Yeah. There's no reason not to attack here.
Yeah,
somebody has to block. Worst case scenario, Samuele blocks with the Rider, the Aven, and brings it back to hand, but he still has to discard the card and with 3 mana on the next turn. So
yeah, discards Artisan of Kozilek. Not enough mana to be able to cast that one in this game just yet,
or ever.
Yeah, it seems a little unlikely for this game. But there is the Ether Snipe. So that's the first threat dealt with. The Ether Snipe really did need to come along exactly then, deal with the 6/6 worm, and
it's a race here. Somebody has power on the board.
This is suddenly looking interesting, and we know that Estrati's deck has a fair amount of removal. I mean, he's not going to want to use too much removal on that Revelark if we can help it, but on almost anything else, it's going to be very solid. It looks like just a Basking Rootwaller in hand for Thomas Friala here.
I don't think he should attack here. Because on the attack back, he's down to 1, and he knows about the Aven and Estrati's hand. So he can't really attack here.
Basking Rootwaller, just not very exciting at this stage in the game here.
And more creatures on the Estrati's side of the board.
Might as well play that Aven that Friala knew about. The Rootwaller doing a lot of work. I mean, in the decks that have lots of discard outlets, the Madness 0 on it, certainly very potent indeed. But more creatures coming down here for Estrati, who's just able to go wide here on this battlefield.
And if he draws another land, he has access to Moon of the Unallowed and Forgotten Alchemy.
Okay, so Phalanx Leader, that a nice one when you got a few creatures on the battlefield, and potentially if Revelark dies, that's still more creatures on the battlefield. But where previously we were talking in game 1 about Friala being able to generate enough creatures to go around Estrati, this time around Estrati is just kind of potentially going to go for a big enough attack that even though Revelark can get a couple of things back, it will come too little too late. Fume Spitter.
Oh wow,
that's
it's a pretty nice draw. So it's a removal 1 mana.
Yeah, I like what's going on here. Basking Rootwaller's ability can only be played once per turn, meaning that you can respond to it by giving it -1/-1 if you want. Likewise, there's some other juicy targets potentially coming along, and Big swings here from Estrati.
Yeah, but even then, like the Fume Spitter can put the cannon on the root wall and it would just die on the next turn.
Oh.
Attack step. Oh yeah, there's the spell that taps creatures. Is Repel the Darkness. Draw a card.
I do like all of that, and it's only about 10 minutes left on this round, and only game 1 in the books thus far, so this is going to be, if we go to a game 3, it's going to have to be a quick one. All right, red zone, well and truly populated by Semillon Estrati's creatures here. They're coming on in and putting a question to Thomas Friala in terms of exactly what he wants to do here, because he can't afford to take all these hits.
And also, one of the thing is, the Revelark is too big now.
Yeah, he used so many travel preps to make it big that now it's able to block without dying, which is a bit of a problem.
You don't want to survive, you want it to die. So Thomas went for the aggression when, at that point, maybe he could have gone for the control with the line I talked about. I don't know if it would have worked, but it's interesting to. It would have been interesting to replay the game with a more controlling approach.
Yeah, and that's something that, of course, because of the wonders of being able to watch this game on camera, he will be able to go back, look at the video on demand, and just be like, okay, now let's figure out, if I had been a little bit more defensive here, maybe if I just saved that travel preparation even, what position would that have left me in? Because at the point where he had Penumbra Worm and Reviarch, he already had a pretty good board, and he was using that travel preparation to try and force through a bit of damage, principally, to be honest, with the worm.
Very well played by Estrati. Just this whole game, his lines of play, he's not blocking to go down to 2. That was
yeah, it set him up to be in this position of now being able to counterpunch. He's having a good old look through what he's seen thus far. And this is essentially, by the looks of things, him planning out, if Reviarch does go away for some reason, how bad is it going to be? Because, if you do get to flicker that Reviarch here, then suddenly there's a lot of blockers coming along. As things stand, though...
Yeah, these 2 counters on the Revelark. Ugh!
I mean, even if we say that Thomas Friala had played the game exactly the same, but had only chosen one target for his travel preparations, which was the Penumbra Worm, rather than including the Reviarch in on it, it seems counterintuitive.
Yeah.
But in this instance, it may have been correct.
Yeah, like blocking the Exosnipe, trading for the Exosnipe.
Yeah.
And getting back the Eternal Witness. That would have kept Estrati from attacking in the last 2 or 3 turns.
Because then you still get back the Reviarch with your Eternal Witness, and you can gradually grind things out. But I can easily see how when you're ahead on life, you end up taking a slightly different line on things. You decide that you want to play things very slightly differently, and in this instance, very slightly differently was the difference between winning the game and losing the game. We think, obviously lots of things Estrati might have done differently in that position, but a really, really interesting game there as we kick things off here in these early stages in Prague playing with Ultimate Masters. We will, of course, have plenty more from our Ultimate Masters Round 2 soon enough in Time Warp Magic, but first, we've got some messages. Hello and welcome back to Prague. Tim Willoughby and Raphael Levy here for a little bit more Ultimate Masters for you. We are right in the middle of round 2. We're going to get a chance to walk on back to the start of round 2 and see a little bit more from our feature match area. We've already had a chance to see Samuel Strati winning his match in round 2, but we have still more action available for you here. Conor Fitzgerald on the left of our side up against Chanyu Panjaki on the right of our screen. I can already see a Celestial Colonnade in hand for Chanyu Panjaki there. If you're going to play a land on turn 1, might as well be a tap land if you've not got too much going on here. On the other side of things, well, it's that Gul'Kul's Accomplice coming along again here. Just a really solid value 2-2 for 2 that has a bit of extra utility in the mid to late game. On the other side of things, though, it looks like not too much action just yet.
Yeah, all these blacks common have like strong second effect. The Dimmer Guildmage.
Yeah. They're just
the crows that give you 2 or 4 cards in the graveyard, which have good synergy with most of the black and blue cards, all black or.
So the
flashback cards
is the follow-up here for Fitzgerald. So a 3/3 for 3, kind of following in the line of Su Chi as a creature that when it dies, you get a whole bunch of mana, the amount of mana that it costs you to cast it. So in this case, when the Cathodian dies, 3 colourless mana being added to your mana pool. No mana burn, so really no downside to that. And very occasionally, the ability ends up being useful. Here, though, on the other side of things, Emancipation Angel for Jackie there. A 3/3 that you had to pick up a permanent when you put it into play. 3/3 flyer, it must be said. So there are occasions that ability can be very potent if you've got a Faith Fetch to one of your creatures, if you've got maybe a creature with a good coming into play ability. The rest of the time, though, just a 3/3 flyer for 3 with a slight drawback.
Yeah, this is not the setup you want to play the Angel. And I mean, bring back your third land. That means you set yourself back a turn, especially in the early turns. This is
yeah, a little risky.
It's not the best setup.
So there we see a whole bunch of lands to choose from. Phyrexian Tower, the one that gets chosen by Conor Fitzgerald there. Just Gurmag Angler as the lone non-land revealed to that Satyr Wayfinder. And Terramorphic Expanse now means that if he does have a splash, we will find out almost certainly what that splash might be. Quite a lot of strong incentives to splash in this sealed format. The games can go a little bit longer, and the power level of doing so can be very high indeed. But fetches another swamp here. Doesn't even need the double green just yet, it would seem.
Such a loss of value here. There's so few ways to find your splashed color. To just spew it on yet another black mana.
Potentially this signals a very, very powerful deck, though, from Conor Fitzgerald. If he is just straight 2 colours, then that means that he must have been very happy with the cards that he got in those 2 colours.
Yeah. I mean, you don't have to splash when you have a Terramorphic Expanse, but
no, not at all. It's just that between Satyr Wayfinder and the Expanse, I don't know. I'm a very easily tempted man, and I think in this case I would very easily have been tempted to find something else that I could potentially squeeze in there.
Now the upside of the Expanse is to have a land in the graveyard for delve purposes.
Alright, so Tecmo's High Priest there coming along, so that the heroic creature that can get things back. Right now, not a whole lot in the graveyard on Chanyu's side of things. And yeah, this Cathodian, it's a 3/3 that doesn't really want to. There's nothing that Chanyu wants to be blocking with here, so he's just sort of taking the damage. Sooner or later, he's going to rue that, though, as he can't afford to take all of this for the end there. It looks like an Apprentice Necromancer coming along there for Fitzgerald.
Able to bring back a Gurmag Angler.
Not the worst, not the worst. We can
not bad.
See some value in that. Spider Umbra and a Hyena in hand for Chanyu Panjaki here, as he potentially could level up that Angel a little bit.
Yeah, the problem is that he's on 12. So is he going to start the race here, or is he going to just play an Umbra and stay back? I could see him play one Umbra on the High Priest and one on the Angel, and start attacking with the 4/4 flyer.
Yeah, I mean, I think
And
that
just
makes sense. He's got a little bit more defense then. He also can make some pretense at actually closing out this game.
I think I also see a Mammoth Umbra.
Oh, wow.
So he could. I think that play would be pretty good. Having a 4/4 flyer and a 3/4 block, and then next turn play the Mammoth Umbra on the flyer.
Yeah.
That way he would have a 7/7 flyer, and he would be able to attack for 7 vigilance damage.
I don't know how much I like the Spider Umbra here on the Angel, given that it can already fly. The reach is kind of a little bit lost, but
I mean, green-black doesn't really have flyers, except for the Crow.
yeah, I mean, there's not loads of downside on it. I mean, as it turns out, he's just going all in on the Angel here.
And no attacks. All right.
A 5/5 first strike double totem armored up creature is going to be a difficult one for Fitzgerald to deal with. Green-black, not known for its ways of dealing with creatures beyond, I suppose, sacrifice effects.
Oh, is that the Boar Umbra as well?
Oh, wow. This could get out of hand.
But it's already like slipping away from the fingers.
Yeah, Fitzgerald here with lots of mana to work with, but not necessarily much else going on. I mean, if he really wants to, he can even sacrifice Cathodian, in effect, getting 5 mana at some point. For now, though,
7 mana.
all is dust.
And that's just such a blowout.
This is almost the perfect answer to what we've got going on here. So, exiling all coloured permanents. Sorry, causing them all to be sacrificed.
Yeah.
Perfect. So, Cathodian gets to hang around.
Oh, wow.
All of those Umbras that got played did absolutely nothing. And Connor Fitzgerald now, a 3/10 clock represented by Cathodian. Yes, he's out of cards in hand, but...
It's Hooting Mandrills. That's the green card that was left.
Okay, well, I mean, Hooting Mandrills, he's going to be able to cast it very, very easily. He's got cards in the graveyard all of a sudden. He's got mana to work with, but I don't think there's too much else going on in Chanyupan Jackie's...
Doesn't he still have the Mammoth Umbra? I mean, 7/7 trample vigilance. It's pretty good against a lone Cathodian.
We will see whether or not it's going to be good enough. Connor Fitzgerald living off the top of his deck here. That all his dust was pretty gigantic. Might be time for a Google accomplice to give Cathodian a friend. Chanyupan Jackie. It's just not quite lined up for him particularly well thus far in the game. There we go. So the Good Caller's Accomplice just generates a zombie on the back end there. Five cards exiled. Is this an angler?
Another angler? That was a pretty good draw.
Yeah, in a world where Hooting Mandrills is a good delve creature, Gurmag Angler a great delve creature. So a little bit of extra pump here and some trample do add up rather nicely.
Getting some extra fur on the mandrills, some mammoth.
We now have
some wool,
some apes cosplaying as a big old elephant.
Some woolly monkey.
It's party time at the zoo right now. On the other side of things, it's some sort of a strange Halloween party that we've got going on here between a zombie fish and a regular old zombie.
Oh, with Ravnica Allegiance and the Simic Guild. With a bunch of like frog, turtle, fish, monkey, cat creatures.
Shallow Grave here being played by Connor Fitzgerald. So
Bird Live.
Oh, sorry, yes. He's going to get a few creatures, put them in the graveyard. Actually,
I love this card. I love Bird Alive in this format.
I mean, even from the very early days that it was first printed, there were some cool things that you could do with it. But
you can't get spider spawning with Bird Alive. 3 creatures. It's a time walk magic, so I don't think.
Yeah, I don't think there's going to be much that we can do to tweak that.
It's like triple Entomb's not. That doesn't really work that way.
Yep, 3 creature cards to put in the graveyard.
Yeah,
this is unfortunate. Sadly, we are looking back in history. Nothing that can be done for now.
But that aside, I love Buried Alive as a card in this format.
Oh yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of cool things that you can do with it.
Ghoulsteed and I like the Ghoulsteed, the Skeleton, and Accomplice is it's my usual like 3 cards I want to put in the graveyard.
And that's not a particularly greedy set of cards to put in the graveyard. I mean,
that's not too bad.
There's lots of other things that potentially can be in there. This is a format where Golgari Brown Scale is an option. I know it's your signature card, Raf.
Yeah, it's on my laptop. It's my lizard pet.
I would venture to suggest that you may have played more copies of Golgari Brown Scale in high-level constructed than any other player in the world.
Probably. I mean, I played as a 4-off, so. And Konor has access to actual 10 manas. Yeah, this is unfortunate.
Yes, that spider spawning should not really be happening now. It's not something that can be fetched with Buried Alive. It may well be that this is a game that Conor Fitzgerald was winning anyway. Hard to say, but with all of these spiders on top, it gets a lot more out of hand. This is obviously something that we can let the judges know about for future to be looking out for, but because it's a time walk match, because it's already happened, there's nothing that we can do to close off this game. All right, Wingsteed Rider coming along for Chanyu Panjaki here, who's looking for a way of fighting back, though worth noting that, of course, that all of those spiders do have reach, so they can potentially just sort of stick a whole bunch of their bodies in the way of any flyer. And this is always the thing that was so rough about spider spawning. The fact that they're 1/2s rather than 1/1s means that with lots of them, you can very easily set up a set of multiple blocks where you really don't lose that many creatures to be able to kill off whatever your opponent's got going on. A favourite card of a lot of people in original Innistrad draft, and I wouldn't be too surprised to say that those people were happy to see it come back in Ultimate Masters. And a big removal spell here for the Mandrills, meaning that these spiders, they are not necessarily going to be for blocking here. So Connor just keeps on attacking here. Chanyu Panjaki taking 7 points of damage, going down to just 2, and I struggle to see how he's going to come back from this. Scoops up his cards, and we will be off to our game 2. These players each reach for their sideboard, see if they can figure out what's going to be going on here. I mean, I would venture to suggest that in the sealed deck format for Ultimate Masters, if you've got ways of dealing with your opponent's graveyard, you should probably just have them in the main deck. There are so many different decks in this format that do cool things with the graveyard, but via the wonders of Time Walk Magic, we do get a chance to go straight into game 2 here. Looks like a mulligan from Conor Fitzgerald here, scrying a card to the bottom there. And we'll see what he's able to muster with his 6-card hand. Early doors, each of these players just playing and passing. This is not necessarily a format where you always get punished for missing your early drops in a way that some other sealed formats can be, though I think that the heroic decks sometimes do have the biggest potential to really punish a slow draw on the other side of things.
And if you're the heroic deck, missing the land drops or missing your early drops, it's pretty bad, because that's usually when you want to have your first damage in.
Canker Abomination on an empty board is spectacular, though. We have a 6/6 on the battlefield for Conor Fitzgerald for just 4 points of mana. And while Chanyu Panjaki here has a lot of good stuff going on, it looks like he's got a Reveillark there, though he might not want to expose it until he's got a few cards in the graveyard. He has, he's got an awkward mix of threats that want to be generating full value here, and being played on an empty graveyard, they're not going to be able to do that. So for now, this Reveillark, it might as well be considered to be a 4/3 flyer that doesn't really want to block, because it's not until there are creatures with power 2 or less in the graveyard that it gets really exciting. When it dies, or sorry, when it leaves play for whatever reason, it will end up being able to get some of those back.
Oh, Crushing Canopy.
That's what you want to do. just kill off that Reverie Arc for no value whatsoever, get stuck in for a full 6 points of damage. Connor Fitzgerald here holding this game very much firmly by the reins.
On turn to Mist, that would have gone perfectly with the Reverie Arc, given that he had more mana to play with.
Yeah, it's a combination that has a lot to be said about it, but ultimately not working out for him at all here. Chan Yupan Jackie is, I mean, when he's only played one threat by turn 5, you know that his draw is not exactly how he might have drawn it up, and yeah, very much on the back foot here against a 6/6 Canker Abomination.
Another
gets down a spider. I mean, everything is kind of a speed bump to your opponent's 6/6 at this point, but you got to do what you got to do. And this time round, every reason for Jackie to just take the damage here, because any kind of an Umbra means that he's got a much more exciting blocker in the future.
He needs 2 Umbras to efficiently block the Abomination, to make his spider X7.
Yeah, I mean, the sad thing for him here is that essentially he's in forced block mode for the rest of the game because of that 6/6. It's not going to take much in the way of removal from Connor Fitzgerald to make that plan not work out so well. Connor passing with all of his mana up, which suggests to me he might well have some piece of removal ready to deploy, depending on what's going on the other side of the table.
How much of a feel bad is this? When you're looking for your second white and you get the 5th forest?
A substantial amount of feel bad. I mean, I wouldn't want to quantify it in any real terms. You know, we're not going to start using kilonewtons or fathoms here, but it's pretty bad.
The feels bad man emojis.
Not like this.
Not like this, yeah. Is summoned.
The not like this emoji is actually Ben Swartz, former Magic commentator and player, but who now works at Twitch, and he figured out that would be an emoji that a few people might need at various points. And right now, Chan Yupan Jackie, I think that would be a reasonable one for him, as his one creature gets targeted by removal spell here. Now, I mean, yes, it might be that this creature ends up getting a little misty-eyed, and indeed misty-bodied, misty-legged, misty every other piece.
Misty web.
Misty thorax.
Misty eye number 1, misty eye number 2, number 3. How many eyes does this spider have?
So many eyes, 8 eyes.
It's not even coming back this turn. It's coming back at the beginning of the next end step. So it's not going to be around to block this turn. Not that he wanted to block this turn.
Yeah, this is all kinds of messy. Connor Fitzgerald here, not with too much more work to do, able to lean on the fact that Chan Yupan Jackie did not have anything going on in the early stages, gets to throw down a 6/6 Canker Abomination on turn 4. And is this a Gurmag Angler? It looks like it is. So 2 lethal threats on the battlefield, 1 blocker available thus far. A little bit of work to be done here.
And another white card.
Rough old series of draws here. Heliod's Pilgrim will get to search up an aura. It's going to have to be a green aura. Gadok Teague was in the deck. That might have been a nice one.
2/2 for 2.
What can get me out of this situation?
Face Feathers?
Face Feathers would be a good pickup for a future turn. Gets a Spider Umber just because it will do something right now. So we may have a spider dressed up as a spider.
To block the...
just getting dressed for his day.
It's actually not so bad. It's actually not so bad. He can block the Angler. And then... Yeah, he has a couple turns. Unless Connor plays a removal. He can survive a couple turns. And he can chomp the Abomination with the Pilgrim. He can block the Angler with the Spider.
I mean, Connor does have All His Dust in hand, but is unlikely to want to play it right now.
Yep.
Big swings, whole bunch of blocks. Turns out that when a spider dresses up as a spider, just essentially gets dressed for his busy day at work, it's pretty good.
Has a lot of reach.
Ghoulsteed comes along and is joined by, there's
two more
the
lethal
apprentice.
creatures.
A complex.
And the second source of white mana in the form of Noble Hierarch. Feels bad, man.
We found a new way of being
Times
mocked for the way that your land situation is playing out. Normally, traditionally, it would be
Colonnade.
like draw the colonnade, which comes into play tapped, but Noble Hierarch will do it too. Summoning Sickness means that one will not be able to be tapped for white mana this turn, and unfortunately, this turn might be the last turn that Yu Pan Jackie gets to start.
Would you play
this match?
Yeah, would you play the Colonnade if your only blue source is a Noble Hierarch?
It's pretty risky.
Yeah.
I mean, the Noble Hierarch you're definitely playing. Like that one's the easy bit.
I mean, he's not dead this turn. He can with the Hierarch play a white creature and play a Prey Upon to kill the Accomplice.
Yeah, this is
not great, but this is a way to survive this turn if you're looking for camera time.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think that's. I mean, the other way that you get camera time, of course, is by thinking real hard for a little while. Though worth noting that at some point these guys will get tight on time.
Now, if you want to complete your quest as well, play X green spell this tournament. You want to be able to draw another card. And
I mean, I like the High Priest now because the High Priest getting in a fight will let you get back the Helot's Pilgrim from the graveyard as well.
Is it power 2 or casting cost 2?
Oh, yes, you might be right.
Yeah, it's casting cost 2, I think.
You are correct.
So it's not bringing back anything.
Not like Reviarch.
Not quite.
Connor Fitzgerald, after having watched all of the careful machinations of Chan Yu Pan Jackie just to stay alive, just turns his creature sideways.
And we're back to the exact same point as last turn.
All of my hard work for nothing. For an extra minute or two. There's the Celestial Colonnade. Very unfortunate set of draws there. Connor Fitzgerald able to take it there, 2-0, and advancing to 2-0 in this tournament. Of course, plenty of rounds left to play today in day one here in Prague. A 6-2 record will be enough to make it into day two. But for now, that's the end of round two. We'll have more Magic for you after these messages.